We're just a few days away from the big game. So why not do our first mock draft of the year? That's what we're going to do here tonight. We're going to talk about a couple of little tidbit news and notes. And then we're going to dive in. We're going to do a full first round mock draft, talk about a lot of different prospects, and give a nice little background as we kind of go through this process. Welcome to the Real Forno Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Real Forno Show, hosted by the one and only Tyler Forness. A to Z Sports sought him out to be their Minnesota Vikings reporter and NFL analyst. And he's a proud contributor over at SKOL North's Purple Daily. Tyler is also the captivating host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, and a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Real Forno Show. I'm your host, Tyler Forness. With me, as always, is producer Dave up there in the top left corner. I'm annoyed today because I now own a Mac, and it is giving me all kinds of annoying problems that are 100% first world. And I blame Dave for it because it is 100% his fault.
Yeah, but you look great.
Well, all right, we'll take that. A couple of little tidbits before we kind of really get started here, because we're going to spend most of our time focusing on the mock draft. One of the reasons why we're focusing on the mock draft, well, Senior Bowl is done, and there are a lot of prospects that we just haven't talked about. And we're going to do a lot of video and audio over the course of the next few months, kind of talking about those things. But one of the big things about the NFL draft, especially this year, guys who could be projected in the top 10 could easily be available at 24. It's a really weird class where picks 20 through 60, they're around the same, according to Daniel Jeremiah. And when that happens, you're going to get a lot of weird, different evaluations. I'm probably only going to end up having like 15 or so first round grades, maybe less. But even within those, like, teams will have upward of like what? Like, there'll probably be a total of 50 different first round grades. One of the reasons why I give that high of a number is if one team has it, that doesn't mean another team is going to. And I think that number of 50 probably will resonate because 20-ish teams might just have one guy that nobody else does. Like that, we're just in that type of class. It's just gonna get weird, and we're gonna see a lot of different things. Even so far, the results of my mock draft tracker that I release every Monday morning, there's been a lot of interesting things coming from that, and we're gonna continue doing that throughout the course of the rest of time. One of the other big things here is, Dave, you're gonna like this. Ben Gessling did an appearance today on Paul Allen's radio show on KFan. Said that he expects the Vikings to be aggressive going for players like Trey Smith. So take that for what it's worth. Usually when Gessling talks, it's worth listening to because, and this is kind of the disconnect that we have between people who are analysts and people who are reporters. Gessling isn't really much of an analyst, and that's not an insult. That's not his job. His job is reporting. So when he says things like, I believe the Vikings are going to be like this, it's worth listening to. He probably knows a few things, and he's alluding to it. And that should make the Vikings fan base happy because all I've seen is the Vikings need to sign Trey Smith. The Vikings need to dump the entire interior of the offensive line. Well, I'll tell you, they shouldn't dump Garrett Bradbury, and we'll get into that here in a second. And we talked about it here on this show. But I found that really interesting, Dave, and I thought you would really appreciate the fact that they're making that kind of effort.
I'd hope Quasi would. That's something that they do need to fix, and if going for the biggest fish in the pond does that, then go for the biggest fish. Now, whether it's wise to go for the biggest fish or, faint like you're going for him and then let the Patriots or somebody sign him, that's fine. As long as you get quality fish better than what we have now, I'm all for it.
It's going to be really interesting to kind of see how things will end up manifesting and things will end up generating in that realm. I'm really intrigued to kind of see what that ends up looking like.
Yeah, because you got to know that there are probably half the teams in the league that would like Trey Smith.
Oh, of course. Like, why wouldn't you? Why
Exactly.
wouldn't you want him? Like, that's kind of the big deal. Why wouldn't you want Trey Smith?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a good answer for that. The only reason why you might not is you are the Philadelphia Eagles and you're locked and loaded. But even so, you could still upgrade the one guard spot. But they just probably don't have the money after paying Landon Dickerson. They're paying a lot on Lane Johnson. They're going to have to pay Cam Jurgens. The Eagles, they're just a weird breed, man. They really are. Lastly, let's talk about Garrett Bradbury. So I wrote a piece today kind of discussing the difficulties behind getting rid of Garrett Bradbury. And it really doesn't have much to do with Bradbury himself. What it has to do with is it can always get worse, Dave. It can always get worse.
That sounds like the mantra of a Vikings fan.
If you are going to replace Garrett Bradbury, you need to guarantee yourself that you have somebody as good or better to replace him. And if you're only going to get somebody as good and that guy's going to cost more money, why are you doing it? To me, that doesn't make fiscal sense. Then take Drew Dahlman. Drew Dahlman, wide zone center, just like Garrett Bradbury, 6'3", 300 pounds, pretty much identical to Garrett Bradbury, has the same flaws as Garrett Bradbury. Why would I want to pay that guy $10 to $15 million a year when I have that at home for $6? To me, I don't get it. I don't see the rationale behind it. I have Drew Dahlman at home. His name is Garrett Bradbury. If you're going to replace him, I'm all for it. But you better have something better. Replacing to just replace is a recipe for disaster. It is a recipe that will just put you in a bad way. Don't do it.
No, if there's nobody out there that's better, which is a shame, then you don't do it. And there's argument that the kid from Atlanta is not as good as Garrett Bradbury or is roughly the same. Well, if you're getting roughly the same, you want to pay the same price. But if you're getting roughly the same and you're paying 3 times as much, it's stupid.
Yeah, it is stupid. It's very stupid.
STUPID, stupid.
Or the better spelling, STOOPID.
Mm-hmm.
I like that one. Yeah, I wanted to at least kind of talk about those couple things. Look, Bradbury's fine. He's an average starting center. You're paying him a little below average starting money.
20-ish.
I don't know. I'd put 20 about average. If you want smack dab average, then 16. Oh, sure. I'm never going to let people forget I begged for Creed Humphrey. I begged.
Exactly.
There is video footage of me begging for probably 2.5 hours for the Vikings to move up for Creed Humphrey.
I know you know. I just like talking about it because I think it's that draft. There's a couple centers in this draft that look appealing.
Not at 24. I ain't taking one of those guys at 24. I love Gray Zabel. That dude is just an ass kicker with a keg of beer in his belly. I'm not taking that guy at 24. Nah, I'm good. All right, Dave. I know it's probably a little early for you to have a roll in, but do you have the PFF mock draft simulator ready to go?
No. I'll get it while I hit the rolling. Welcome to Vikings First and SKOL's Mock Draft Mondays. Who will the Vikings pick? And who's your favorite choice?
Boom, 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 boom.
Oh, wrong window. Why is it not showing? Oh.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Close window. Boom. Close window. There we go. You're looking at my wonderful artwork. Or we're looking at it.
Yes.
All right. Minnesota.
No, we're going to do the whole first round, all 32 teams, Dave. I kind of want to the whole point of tonight is we're going to kind of introduce everybody to all the prospects. And we'll do a full round one mock, and then from there.
And let me get your camera back in here. It's been a long time. There we go. All right. So, Northview says PFF sucks. Yes.
I like the data collection.
Mm-hmm. Jason asks, what's the % chance we trade back from 24?
Depends on what the offers are. The big thing with Quasido Fomensa is they are going to have a plan. And if you match their asking price, yeah, hell yeah, they'll trade. Because then they feel like they are getting adequate value.
Mm-hmm.
What is that value? I have no idea.
Okay.
I think it's likely they'll end up trading back. We'll see.
All right. You ready to start?
Yes, sir. So the whole point of this exercise is we're going to talk about prospects. And the funnest way to do it is I'm going to have this on a separate screen because I cannot see anything.
I want to blow it up, but on the clock, Tennessee, they need QB, tackle, edge rusher, cornerback.
All right, so this is an interesting one. I think you could make the real argument that Cam Ward is a better quarterback than Shedeur Sanders, but I'm taking Shedeur Sanders here because he is not Joe Burrow, but stylistically, this is the closest thing to Joe Burrow, and that was where Brian Callahan had the most success on offense when he was the offensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals. That's just stylistically, it just makes too much sense. Sanders obviously played for his dad Dion in Colorado. Like, I don't think he's going to give you all the plus traits that you want. I don't think he's going to give you every little nuance, but he's a very good football player. He's a great distributor of the football. And if you want to talk about a stylistic comparison, it's Joe Burrow. He's not Joe Burrow, though. And that's going to drop him down a lot of boards for teams. But having that stylistic matchup, I think is really good. Because then they're going to be simpatico as far as how Callahan wants to play and how Sanders already plays. I think those things matter. Fit matters.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, Cleveland Browns. Look, this one's easy. We haven't talked about it. We're going Abdul Carter for Penn State, the edge rusher. No ifs, ands, or buts. This was kind of already semi-locked in for me before the Myles Garrett trade request. And now it feels pretty certain. Carter's just special. If you think about Micah Parsons, but just a little bit better, that's kind of what Abdul Carter is. Same profile, played middle linebacker for 2 years at Penn State, then went to edge rusher and dominated. He's just a damn good football player. The Vikings could potentially be in on Myles Garrett. Should they be? I think you can make the argument that they probably shouldn't. But I do think it would be fascinating to see how good a Brian Flores defense would be with Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett's like this generation's Reggie White. Just an incredible football player. He's been like 8 years already, has over 100 sacks. Over the last 3 years, has a 24.4% pressure rate. So he gets pressures on basically one of every 4 pass rushes.
Yeah, but that is
absurd.
Are you saying the Vikings are going to try for Myles Garrett?
I'm saying they should. If they haven't called already, they should. You should at least see what it'll take and go from there. It might be too much. And considering how the Vikings have a good edge rusher room, maybe you don't do it. Or maybe you can make it work. This is a generational type player. He is the best defensive player in football. Even when Aaron Donald was in the league, you could argue that Myles Garrett was the best defensive player in football. It's hard to say no to a guy like that. Transform a defense completely. And his defense was great last year. Like, but you have to at least entertain the idea.
Yeah, but the question is, what's the cost?
2 first-round picks at minimum?
Or trading somebody.
Maybe 2 first-round picks in Dallas Turner?
Nah, it's too much.
I don't know. He's 29 years old. You're still getting at least 5 years of a prime. I'm not saying I would do it. You got to think about it.
Now, this is one where tag and trade Darnold, but it won't work because they need money.
Mm-hmm. All right.
However, let's go trading him is going to take off $22 million. But anyways, they still need more money.
Let's go to number 3. New York Giants. This is Cam Ward. Hyper athletic quarterback. When he's in the pocket, kind of reminds me of Kyler Murray a little bit, how he moves, like the movement skills. He can also do weird, funky things with arm angles in similar ways to guys like Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, Murray. He's got freaky arm angles like that. So they get the quarterback they desperately need in New York. Brian Daboll knows how to work with guys who have just stupid tools. So it's a very, very good fit from that perspective. For New England Patriots. Look,
hold on. Before we get to the Pats, T-Bass says, let's go for the guard from Kansas City, Trey Smith. Who's the best in the game instead of defensive end that we have plenty of?
One, I don't think Trey Smith's the best guard in football. 2, Myles Garrett is already a Hall of Famer, and he's still in his prime. He's different. It's like
Justin Jefferson.
No, Randy Moss kind of different. It's different. He's not just a good edge rusher. He's special. He's different. He is like the Randy Moss of edge rushers. It's just on another level. So even though the Vikings have a really good edge room, you still got to think about it. For the New England Patriots, Travis Hunter, best player in the draft. This dude is incredible. And the fact that he's available at 4 is because the 2 quarterbacks and the Browns had their hand kind of forced with the Myles Garrett situation, and they have 3 good corners. If Myles Garrett doesn't ask for a trade, they probably take Hunter because he's that good.
Now, how much percentage does he play on offense?
30 to 40%. I don't think he plays that much on offense, but I also don't think it's nothing.
I agree.
Like, Dion never played full-time on both sides of the ball. Now, could he have? Maybe if he didn't play baseball. Yeah, Dalton Risner is different. He's bad. Let's move on. Number 5, Jacksonville Jaguars. So this is interesting.
Speaking of Risner, I'm going to hold up. Speaking of Risner, did you see PFF has him as the number 1 Vikings re-sign?
Yeah. Number one re-sign with a bullet is Byron Murphy Jr. I don't care.
I agree.
5 Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm going to kind of go chalk with a lot of these picks because I want to introduce you guys to like prospects and prospect fits So there's some familiarity. The Jaguars need pressure up the interior. They need defensive tackle help. They also need cornerback. They have Tyson Campbell. I think you can find a good corner in free agency. I also think you can find a really good corner later on, but you could also find a really good defensive tackle later on. I think right now the defensive tackle is the better spot to take from a value perspective. So I'm going to take Mason Graham from Michigan. I'm not the highest on Mason Graham, but I think I'm going to be a little bit of an outlier there. It's very interesting because he's a true gap shooter. He's an absolute monster. He can absolutely wreck a game. Just go watch the USC game. He wrecked it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Pick number 6, Las Vegas Raiders. If you can't get a quarterback, the number one player who's going to touch the ball for your team is a running back. They don't have one of those either. This whole offense is not good. The offensive line's pretty solid, though, so they don't have to worry about that. Take the special player. Take Ashton Genty, running back, Boise State. Running back, he might be the best overall prospect we've had at running back in as many years because there's just nothing that he doesn't do well. Saquon was more explosive. Christian McCaffrey was a better receiver. This dude can do everything. I think you'd prefer to take Genty on a trade back, but quite frankly, just take him now. Just take him now. Pick 7, the New York Jets. They'd like a quarterback here, but they also need to fortify corner, especially with Sauce Gardner kind of making comments about, hey, I'm kind of annoyed. And then you also are probably losing DJ Reed. So Will Johnson, cornerback, Michigan. Great press man corner. Kind of had an off year. Some of it was injury related for Will Johnson, but he's a good football player. And sometimes you just take good football players. 8, Carolina Panthers. You got to continue to find ways to get Bryce Young help. Jalen Coker, good football player. Xavier Legette, we'll see. Adam Thielen, probably on his way out. I kind of want to go Tetairoa McMillan here, but I think that might be a little bit rich. So this is where, and I actually think he might be available for the Vikings. I'm really high on him. But the safety from Georgia, Malachi Starks. This guy isn't a safety, and I know Georgia safety, people are going to get PTSD from Lewis Cine. He's not Lewis Cine. This dude can play outside corner. This is like Minkah Fitzpatrick, like stylistically. He can play outside. He can play nickel. He can play in the box. He can play over the top. He can play half field, like center field. He can do everything. If he runs well enough, there are some NFL teams that'll probably use him at corner. Like, this dude is good, special good. So I'm not necessarily worried about the fact he's a Georgia safety. I'm not going to have that PTSD. Totally understand if you do. 9, New Orleans Saints. Well, they need defensive line help. And there's nothing more New Orleans Saints than taking a big, freaky edge rusher. So that's what they're going to get here. Texas A&M's Shamar Stewart down at number 20, Dave. I evaluated Shamar Stewart yesterday, released a scouting report on him for A to Z Sports this morning. Let me tell you, Shamar Stewart, this dude might be the best player in the draft. He is 6'5", 281, and moves like Danielle Hunter. He's just huge. He's long. He's athletic, explosive. No matter what, he can do it for you. And I think that's a special kind of thing. He's a special player.
And he did well at the Senior Bowl, too.
Oh, he was great. He was great. And that matched everything you saw in film. 10, Chicago Bears. Look, no ifs, ands, or buts. They desperately need to bulk the offensive line. Will Campbell, LSU. Whether it's inside or outside. He needs to be a Chicago Bear. He'll help elevate that offense more than we can quantify right now.
Which side does he play?
Left. He was a left tackle, but he's got short arms. If you have to put him in a guard, that's fine. No problem. All right. 11, San Francisco 49ers. They need defensive line. They also need Offensive line. This isn't necessarily the best offensive line class, but we're going to go Josh Simmons out of Ohio State. When it's all said and done, he might be the number one offensive tackle in the class. He hurt his knee against Oregon back in October, and he missed the rest of the season. And nobody really knows what that knee injury is. Would not shock me if it was a torn ACL, but everybody's been kind of mum on what it is. Just a good football player. Up a little bit. He's I think he was number 12. Josh Simmons.
There you go. The Ohio State.
12, Dallas Cowboys. This is where the Dallas Cowboys always win. They just wait for players to fall down the board and they take him. That's how they end up with CeeDee Lamb, and Lamb is a top 5 wide receiver in the game. And they're going to get that here. They're going to take the number 1 wide receiver, Tetairoa McMillan out of Arizona. He's a traditional X, 6'5", 212. He moves really smooth. He's almost like watching Gumby glide on the field because he's tall and long and skinny, but he doesn't play weak. He can box you out. He can monster over you. He can do all these different things.
Built like Moss?
Not quite that skinny.
Okay.
But he's only 212 at 6'5". He's a little slender, but he doesn't play weak.
As in snap. Oops.
Not that bad. 13, Miami Dolphins. We're going to go to your area, Dave. We're going to go to Austin, Texas. Offensive lineman Kelvin Banks Jr. from Texas. Good football player. Probably projects better on the inside, but I think he can be a left tackle at the next level. He's long enough to do so. And just if Terran Armstead comes back, guess what? Just play him. If he doesn't, well, guess what? Now you have a left tackle. You need more bodies on the interior. You need more offensive linemen. Just take him. Take him and figure it out. 14, Indianapolis Colts, Dave. This is an interesting one because they desperately need tight end. They also need edge rusher, which is wild considering they've taken 3 edge rushers in the top 2 rounds over the last 4 years. But they're in that boat again. I think that we're looking at tight end is still here. Tyler Warren, 6'6", 265-pound monster behemoth from Penn State. This is just a good-ass football player. And he can do a little bit of everything, and he's still growing. I think that's the important part. He's still growing. You're not going to be able to have guys like that still grow for you. And he's 23. He was a high school quarterback, so he's still learning the position a little bit, which from an age perspective, you don't love, but contextually, it's like, that's fine. That's no problem. 2 more, and then we're gonna talk about the big game, Dave. We're gonna talk about the big game because it's on Sunday and it's really exciting. Atlanta Falcons, goodness gracious, they need help from Michael Penix. They need edge rush. They're probably not going to get. They're not probably not going to get a pass rusher of this kind of caliber in round 2. We're going to go Mike Green from Marshall. Feels kind of weird drafting a Marshall guy, and he looks small on his college film. But when you watched him in Mobile, and this is where the Senior Bowl is important, you get to watch guys up close in person. You get to see what their bodies look like. You get to see how they perform against other players of a certain caliber. And he got to play up a level of competition, being in the group of 5 instead of the power 4. And he dominated. One of the best players on the field. And he weighed 251. But you could tell when you're standing next to him, it ain't fake weight. That was big boy weight. That was real weight. And I thought that was great to see. I thought it was awesome to see him kind of take that step forward. And yeah, we're going to go Mike Green from Marshall to the Falcons. Would not shock me if he snuck up even higher than that. 16, Arizona Cardinals. They need offensive line and they need defensive line really bad. So I'm going to give him kind of a hybrid guy. Mykel Williams from Georgia. He's got like almost 36-inch arms. He's a humongous football player. And when you're at Georgia, you're not necessarily asked to do a lot. And I think they'll be able to use him as an edge rusher. They'll be able to use him with his hand in the dirt, and with how Nick Rawlis and Jonathan Gannon are calling that defense, having that type of versatility to pair with Darius Robinson, who they got last year, is going to be probably more of an inside guy. I think you have an interesting duo to continue to build that front seven around and really impact the game in a havoc type way. All right, Dave, are you ready? Are you ready to talk about? Are you ready to talk about the big game?
The whole enchilada. Yeah.
Look, we are, as we are every week, sponsored by our friends at Underdog Fantasy. As you can see up in the top right corner. I'd like to think that's Odie, but that dog has a long snout, so I don't. Well, we may have to get an Odie created Underdog graphic at some point, because that is my good boy. Underdog is a place to play if you are a fan and you just want to have extra fun while watching the game. And it's pretty simple, and we tell you guys this every week. All you gotta do is pick higher or lower on multiple different stats for your favorite players. And even if you're not super invested in the Eagles or the Chiefs, you can be invested in players. Maybe you want to see Saquon Barkley score a touchdown. You think he's going to. Well, guess what? Just go over his 1/2 touchdowns. Dave's got a graphic ready to go. I've got my plays for the big game. And the best part is you can get a no sweat first bet. So this is just a $10 play. 3 picks. Higher with those rushing receiving yards. Patrick Mahomes, more than 1.5 passing touchdowns. Devonta Smith with over 0.5 rushing and receiving touchdowns combined. $10 can net you $81.60. That's it. It is that simple. And this is also a no sweat entry, which means you either cash it or you get your entry fee back in bonus credit for another bet. That's simple. That's simple. All you got to do is come join us at Underdog. And if you do so before the big game kicks off in any of the available states you see on the screen, with promo code Forno, get up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you make your first deposit, and you get that free pick. Pretty simple, pretty fun, and it's a great way to enjoy the big game this upcoming Sunday. All right, Dave, are we ready?
Those free picks were great. They look fantastic.
Yeah. And that's it.
And you win $85 or whatever it is. That's a nice bottle of whiskey, baby.
For $10. Yeah, that's it. All right.
So
we've got 16 more picks to go, including the Minnesota Vikings. So we're going to get back to it. The Bengals, they desperately need 2 things. One, they need to make sure
they don't get run over going to the practice field.
I got an email that was relatively important, but we'll talk about that later. There's 2 things. One, they need to figure out who's going to play wide receiver opposite Jamar Chase. If it's not T. Higgins, they're probably going to draft somebody. Luther Burden III here. It makes a lot of sense for Missouri. But I think Burden ends up staying. They desperately need help on the interior of that defensive line. They need it bad. So we're going to go a little bit of a different direction. We're going to go Kenneth Grant, the defensive tackle from Michigan. He's athletic enough to do some 3 technique things, but he is probably a 1 technique moving forward. I do think he's a good football player, and he's got pass rush upside. So even if he's a nose tackle, he has some pass rush upside, and I think that's a really nice thing to have if you are the Bengals, because you desperately need somebody other than Trey Hendrickson to step up and do something. You do. 18, Seattle Seahawks. it's an interesting spot. They so desperately need offensive line. This is just not a good offensive line class, but there is one guy that I think could be available for them and could be in play. We're going to go with that. Armand Membu from Missouri, right tackle for him. And this dude is just really, really good at football. One of the cleanest tackle prospects I've seen in a little while. And being able, with the issues they've had at right tackle with Abraham Lucas having all these knee issues, and even if he plays, hey, then maybe you kick him inside to guard, and you have Membu. You could also kick Membu inside if Abraham Lucas is ready to go. So I think all those things matter. You have to find a way to keep Geno Smith upright. Ryan Grubb didn't work out. Clint Kubiak now goes in there. They're going to probably do a lot more wide zone kind of stuff. I think Kenneth Walker stock through the moon. Thankfully, he's on my Dynasty League team. I could use that. But I do think that this is a really good fit for the Minnesota Vikings. The Seattle Seahawks. Speaking of good fit, we are going to go with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and just right to the top of the board, James Pierce Jr., the edge rusher. They need edge rushers. They need guys who are fast because that's how Todd Bowles likes his edge rushers. He likes them speedy coming off the edge, and James Pierce Jr. is about as speedy as you get. He's going to be a wide 9 type, really only around 250 pounds. Not great at going to be stopping the run, but that type of player is going to fit really well with what Todd Bowles loves to do. Next up, Denver Broncos. Look, I'm not a believer in Bo Nix. He has to prove more to me than what he did last year. He does.
Really? I thought he proved a lot more than he did coming out of Oregon.
He's got a lot more to prove. And I think one of the things you can do with Bo is get him some more help. What better than the best yak receiver in this draft, Luther Burden III? This guy is like Debo light. He's not as good as Debo, but stylistically, he does some of the same things. I think he's going to be more of a slot, but you have Cortland Sutton on the outside. You don't have to worry so much about those elements. Just get him the ball in space and let him run. And I think you can do that with Luther Burden III. 21, the Pittsburgh Steelers. They need wide receiver. They need quarterback. Look, I'm going to go one way here. Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver, Ohio State. Boring pick, smart pick, the right pick. End of story. This dude is just a good football player. He's just solid.
But who's throwing to him?
We'll figure that out. I'm not. There is no quarterback worth taking here. They already did that with Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, I agree.
I will not hear Jackson Dart should be the pick here. Jackson Dart is not an NFL quarterback. He's just not. 22, the Los Angeles Chargers. This team is good, and they need a lot at the same time. They were able to overcome a lot of their issues with really good scheme and guys like Justin Herbert. But they need help. Yeah. There's one player that just fits this team to a T. And when you think about how Greg Roman likes to call his offense, how Jim Harbaugh likes to play football, it is Omarion Hampton, the running back from North Carolina. True dual threat. He's going to be able to really run a lot of that inside zone and gap stuff that they do really well and what Greg Roman likes to call. And he can catch the ball out of the backfield. He can be a true 3-down back. So Hampton, to me, it's just a great fit. Green Bay Packers, wide receiver, center, edge, cornerback. I just want to send these guys bad football players every single time. But
yeah, where's the punter?
I have some integrity, so we're not going to do that. But I think they're good on offensive line. I mean, you're never good on offensive line, but what I mean is I don't think they're going to take one.
What about their center? Are they going to resign him?
I don't think so. He tore his Achilles at the end of the year. I think they're going to they'll probably find somebody else. You could talk about Gray Zabel here, but them taking a center in the first round is very anti-Green Bay Packers. I think they'll This might be the year they finally go wide receiver in round 1, Dave. This might be the year. Matthew Golden from Texas. They need an alpha. They need a number 1. And I think Golden has the ability to be that guy. I loved his tape at Houston, transfers to Texas. Kind of was like an afterthought. But man, this guy's just a good football player. He knows how to run routes. He knows how to get open and separate. He knows how to track the football down the field. He can do a lot. All right, Minnesota Vikings. Walter Nolan's on the board. I would love him, but I've heard that some things about maybe the Vikings aren't keen on him. So I'm probably going to stay away from that. Cornerback is always an interesting idea here. There's some really interesting players that we can kind of look at, but this is just a really bad draft class on an overall level. So what we're going to do is we're going to take versatility, because that is the name of the game when it comes to Brian Flores. We're going to go down, and out of the University of Texas, we're going to take cornerback Jahdae Barron, who won the Jim Thorpe Award for being the best defensive back in the nation this past year. He can play on the outside. He can play in the slot. He can play in the box. He can play a deep safety. He can play a half field, full field, whatever you want, he can do it. And that kind of versatility, I think, is huge for how Brian Flores likes to operate, how he likes to run his defense. And that will take things to a different level. I think this makes all the sense in the world. Barron is a good football player who can do everything for you in that secondary. And with where the Vikings secondary is now, I think it makes all the sense in the world. But things may change once we get past free agency and we see where everything sits. And maybe the focus is going to be strictly on the interior of the defensive line. I like Nolan a lot. He's a top 3 player for me right now. But at the end of the day, I don't think the Vikings are going to love him because of some of the off-the-field stuff that I've heard about.
T-Bass says, I want him to play guard or center. Can he do that?
No. Here's the thing. Vikings fans are so fixated, and I'm just talking in a general sense. They're so fixated on the offensive line. We have to replace 4, maybe 5 players in the secondary. That is more important than finding one offensive lineman on the interior. People don't want to admit the interior of the offensive line was fine. It was good with Christian Darrisaw. You get Christian Darrisaw back, who cares? It's negligible. It's fine.
We need to fix it. Period. One way or the other. Free agency most likely, but we need, if we can find somebody we can draft and keep and play at the lower cost point to go along with JJ. We need to do that. Both JJs.
Sure, but it's not as broken as people think it is. It just isn't. You bring back Christian Darrisaw, that's
pain in the ass for the last decade and a half.
Sure, but guess what? This regime isn't going to overpay just to do that. The pass block win rate. Hold on, the pass block win rate for this team was second in the NFL. Second. That includes the interior. Like, this interior of the offensive line is not great, but it is not this abject disaster that people want to make it out to be, because all they remember are the last 2 games. They just remember the last 2 games. Darrisaw didn't play half the year. That was your issue. Darrisaw plays, the other issues are nowhere nearly as compounded, especially Blake Brandel. So I'm not worried about it. No, I'm not nearly as worried about it as other people, and I bet the Vikings will end up feeling somewhat similar. If they go get Trey Smith, that's probably it on the offensive line. It's probably it.
Oh, there's some lower guys that, the 5, 6, 7 million that'll do better, or at least as well.
I don't know. Blake Brandel was incredible with Christian Darrisaw next to him, so I think they're going to run that back. I really do.
We need a right guard. If that's Trey Smith, I'm happy. We need a center that won't get his ass forklift back into the quarterback.
Well,
if that's really Trey Smith playing next to Bradbury and helping, okay.
He doesn't really do that much anymore, get forklift back into the quarterback every so often. But here's the thing. When you have a guy like Darrisaw, they do such a good job of mitigating all those things for Bradbury where he doesn't get in those situations that if you have a healthy Darrisaw, who cares? It's fine.
Yeah, but when you get the big guys like Sexy Dexy coming up the middle, that's when they have problems. We need an answer to that. And we need an answer to run blocking. Now, when it comes to Bradbury's a fantastic run blocker. I have no issue with his run blocking. Dalton Reisner, I have all sorts of issues with his run blocking. But
I do not want Reisner back on this football team. He is not good.
And I agree with you 100%. However, PFF, like I said, counts him as the number one target we should re-sign, which is absolutely bullshit. To mimic that meme of the kid sitting in the seat, back seat. But it is what it is. The offensive line has been a pain and an irritant, a thorn in the side of this Minnesota Vikings for a long time. And Vikings fans, me included, would like it to see it return to be a powerhouse. Not just fine.
Yeah.
Fine will work if it gets us to the Super Bowl. But a powerhouse gets us to the Super Bowl. Look at the Eagles. Look at the Chiefs. Chiefs revamped theirs all in one offseason.
Yeah, but you have to have a guy like
now.
Well, you have to have a guy like Trey Smith who had, I think it was blood clot issues, fall to round 6. Otherwise, that guy goes top 50. Creed Humphrey falling to 61, I think it was, where he got drafted to 63.
Didn't you want
was an
Creed
abomination.
Humphrey?
I love Creed Humphrey. It was an abomination. But you have to be willing to draft right, and you have to hit, and you have to be consistent with it, and you have to spend big money. All those things have to hit for you at once. And this isn't the offensive line class to do that. But if you get Trey Smith, you'll be just fine. That offensive line will be more than capable. Like, we're 2 months away from this offensive line being talked about as like a top 10 unit consistently, like by everyone. Just remember that.
Chris, the answer is yes.
All right. We got 8 picks left. Let's kind of speed run this. 25, Houston Texans. Talk about a team that's so desperate for interior offensive line help. They're worse off than we are. Because of where they're at, we're going to go Gray Zabel from North Dakota State. Gives them the flexibility to do a little bit of everything. And
Boo.
I think that will end up manifesting itself in a really positive way. 26, the Los Angeles Rams. This is where Colson Loveland comes off the board, the tight end. They're trying to trade Cooper Kupp. They have Puka Nacua, who's basically like a big slot kind of guy anyways. They love having these mismatch type weapons. There was a lot of scuttlebutt that they were trying to move up for Brock Bowers last year, and they just were not able to do that. He's not Brock Bowers, but he's going to be able to do some of the similar things that Brock Bowers did as far as the movement skills. And being able to attack vertically down the field, being able to do run after the catch stuff. And I think that that's going to be really appealing to Sean McVay. 27, the Baltimore Ravens. They just take good football players. They just take guys who fall, who probably shouldn't. And I think this is where a guy like Josh Connerly Jr., the tackle from Oregon, comes off the board. He was probably the best offensive lineman not named Gray Zabel in Mobile. He had the one rep where Mike Green just forklifted him. He just was speed to power and just got him off balance, and boom, that happens to every offensive lineman once in a while. But he had a really good week other than that. He's a good athlete. He's got a really good foundational base. And with Ronnie Stanley set to be a free agent, I think this is a really good way to continue to fortify the offensive line. 28, the Detroit Lions. Haha, they're picking 28. That's funny. They need an edge rusher opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. They need it bad. Yeah, if they stay and like average healthy, this team is probably in the Super Bowl, but they didn't. And we get to laugh about it. Nick Scorton, the edge rusher from Texas A&M. He's big, he's fast, he's athletic. And I think this is the type of guy that they're going to try to want to play on the opposite Aiden Hutchinson. 29, Washington Commanders. I think this is where Benjamin Morrison comes off the board. He's got a hip injury, but nobody really knows if it's structural, if it's like a flexor, if it's a labrum, if it's a break, dislocation. Nobody knows. They just know hip. This is one of the tough parts about college football injuries. The reporting's not great. But Morrison can do a lot for you. He's a really good man cover corner. I like Benjamin Morrison. I think he can do a lot of really good things.
Does he have a combine invite?
I believe so. I mean, he'd get one anyways.
Then.
Well, everybody that's like a top 100 projection is going to get an invite. 30, the Buffalo Bills. Why not take Ed Oliver Jr., Walter Nolan? Just get another just absolute monster on the interior and just keep disrupting. Just keep finding ways to get to the quarterback. Nolan can play like a big edge. He can stunt. He can slant. He can do everything. And he's also a really good run defender, which is an underrated aspect for being a good 3 technique. It's not just about pass rush. You got to defend the run. The way this is structured, I believe they do it by record, which the Chiefs have a better record. So the Eagles are picking at 31. I know Chris asked earlier if I had a crystal ball to see who is going to win the Super Bowl, and I don't. I did pick the Chiefs for our A to Z predictions that came out earlier today, but I'm not that convinced. I only have a 3-point lead. The Eagles, they need edge rush. They need a guard. They're probably not going to take a guard here. They might be willing to take a tackle, but I don't think there's good enough tackle here to really prioritize. They will not take a linebacker. They won't. It says they need a corner, but they just drafted 2 of them last year, so I don't think that that's really in play. They're kind of just in a tough spot. They're in a really tough spot for kind of how the board ended up falling to them. So taking a look, they're set on the interior. They need edge rush help. Jack Sawyer is not good. I think this might be the spot where Princely Umamielen comes off the board out of Ole Miss. He's transferred from Florida, so I know him pretty well. He's tall, he's long, he's explosive and fast. And these are the type of guys that they will draft, they will stash, and they will develop, and they will grow. And I think that's what the Eagles do. They just draft trench players, and they just thrive. 32, Kansas City Chiefs. They're just going to take a good football player. They need some interior help because I think it's just Chris Jones coming back. On the interior of that defensive line. So we're going to give them Derek Harmon from Oregon to wrap it up here. This guy is your classic 3 technique. He can do a little bit of everything. He's a good run defender. Needs to get a little bit better at tackling, oddly enough. But I do think that this is kind of where things will end up going. And that is our draft, Dave. We have completed the first round of the draft. There will never be a better mock draft than this. This is the only mock draft you'll ever need to see. I'm 100%.
Oops.
So we're going to do more of these. We're going to do some Viking specific ones. We're going to continue to look at kind of how things will be structured, how things will end up manifesting. And this is kind of where things sit now, and things could look sincerely different in a couple of months. And that's why we like to do these regularly, because it will change. It will grow. It will develop. And we'll see a lot of different kinds of mock drafts come out. We'll probably do one where it's just wild and crazy. we'll have some fun with it. And I'm just kind of resounding myself to the Vikings are probably going to take a corner. That's kind of where my brain is. I think they're going to end up with a corner. They need youth at the position so badly. And it's a really good cornerback class. So you're going to get value there too. But there she is. First round mock draft.
In the books.
In the books. Thank you guys so much for watching. Are we going to have a Sal show this week, Dave?
Hopefully tomorrow. She's come down with the flu or whatever's rolling up through your area of the woods. It's absolutely knocked people down. It's been bad. She's feeling a little better today, but not 100%. Hopefully tomorrow she'll be ready to go.
I know the feeling.
If not, Saturday, you have two old vloggers with Darren and I. We'll break down the news of the week and go from there.
Thank you very much, George, for the super chat. We're going to have a lot more of these mock drafts. We're going to have a lot more analysis. We're going to start breaking down like different areas of the free agent class, who the Vikings should and shouldn't bring back. And I do think that this is going to be a lot of fun over the next few weeks before free agency starts. Legal tampering period, I believe, is March 10th, Monday. And then March 12th is when teams can sign players officially. And that'll do it for us. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm Tyler. He's Dave. SKOL Vikings, everyone.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Forness and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching The Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone!